My wife broke up with me for the dumbest reason after I supported her law school education for years. But she forgot the house is in my name. And now she's living in her car. Let me paint you a picture of the most expensive mistake I ever made. And trust me, I've made some doozies. Her name was Clara, and for 6 long years, I thought she was my partner, my ride or die, my future wife who'd eventually help me build the white picket fence American dream. Turns out, she was more like my personal financial vampire, sucking my bank account dry while I sat there like some lovesick idiot, thinking I was investing in our future. 6 years. 6 whole years of my life where I played the role of Clara's walking, talking ATM machine. You know those sugar daddies you see on reality TV? Yeah, well, I was Clara's everything daddy, tuition daddy, rent daddy, grocery daddy, you name it. The woman had me so whipped, I was basically sponsoring her entire existence while she pursued her dreams of becoming a hotshot lawyer. Let's break down the Clara expense report, shall we? First up, tuition. Law school ain't cheap, folks, especially not at the fancy private university she just had to attend because state schools don't have the same networking opportunities. That little piece of wisdom cost me roughly 40 grand a year. 40 grand. That's more than most people make in a year, and I was dropping it like it was pocket change because Clara convinced me it was an investment in our future. Our future, my ass. Then there was rent. Now, I already owned my house, bought it fair and square with my own money before I even met this woman. But did Clara contribute to the mortgage? The utilities? The property taxes? Hell no. Instead, she moved in and suddenly everything became ours in her mind, even though my name was the only one on any official document. But hey, she was studying law, so obviously she understood property ownership, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. And don't even get me started on the grocery situation. This woman had the audacity to claim that her constant snack runs to Whole Foods were study fuel. Study fuel? Like she was some kind of academic athlete training for the intellectual Olympics. Meanwhile, I'm watching her demolish a $12 bag of organic quinoa chips while binge-watching Netflix. Those weren't study snacks. They were premium entertainment munchies funded by yours truly. Speaking of studying, let me tell you what Clara's version of hitting the books actually looked like. Picture this. Clara sprawled across the couch I paid for, wearing pajamas I probably bought her during some random Target run, with legal textbooks spread around her like decorative pillows. She'd highlight random sentences, and I mean random, like she was playing textbook roulette, while simultaneously watching Suits for the 15th time. Because apparently, Harvey Specter was going to teach her more about contract law than her actual professors. My buddy Jamal, bless his brutally honest soul, tried to warn me. Dude, he'd say every time we grabbed beers, you're not her boyfriend. You're her student loan with benefits. But did I listen? Of course not. Love makes you stupid, and I was valedictorian of the school of stupid when it came to Clara. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Once she graduated, once she passed the bar exam, once she landed that 6-figure job at some prestigious firm, we'd both be living the good life. She'd pay me back, we'd split expenses like normal couples do, and all this sacrifice would finally pay off. I had it all figured out in my head. We'd be the power couple, the success story, the look how far we've come Instagram post that makes everyone else jealous. But here's the thing about Clara's relationship with the bar exam. The only bar she was interested in passing was happy hour at whatever trendy spot was offering half-price Cosmos that week. While her classmates were cramming for the most important test of their legal careers, Clara was cramming apps and cocktails down her throat, usually on my dime, naturally. The woman had perfected the art of looking busy without actually doing anything productive. She'd sit at her desk, the $600 ergonomic monstrosity I bought her because she claimed the kitchen table was disrupting her study flow. And she'd arrange her notebooks and pens like she was setting up for a photo shoot. Then she'd spend 3 hours scrolling through social media, occasionally picking up a highlighter to make it look legit whenever I walked by. Meanwhile, I'm working my ass off at my actual job, the one that pays for everything, trying to climb the corporate ladder while simultaneously funding Clara's extended vacation from responsibility. I'd come home exhausted, ready to collapse, and find Clara stressed out because she'd spent the entire day researching wedding venues on Pinterest. For our future wedding, of course, which I'd inevitably be paying for too. The worst part? She made me feel guilty for even thinking about the money. Anytime I'd mention expenses or suggest maybe she could pick up a part-time job, she'd hit me with the wounded puppy dog eyes and remind me how hard she was working, how stressed she was, how much pressure she was under. And like the sucker I was, I'd apologize and transfer more money into her account for emergency expenses, which usually translated to emergency Starbucks runs and emergency online shopping sprees. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I ignored. The way she never even pretended to reach for her wallet when we went out. How she'd make plans for expensive weekend getaways without consulting our budget. Or should I say, my budget. The casual way she'd mention needing new clothes for networking events that always seemed to involve more shopping than networking. But the biggest red flag of all, the complete lack of gratitude. Not once in 6 years did Clara acknowledge what I was doing for her. It wasn't appreciation she showed me. It was expectation. Like I owed her this lifestyle, like supporting her was my natural obligation as her boyfriend. She'd gotten so comfortable with me paying for everything that she forgot it was a privilege, not a right. So there I was, 6 years deep in the Clara money pit, convinced I was being a supportive partner when really I was just being a convenient idiot. 6 years of tuition payments, rent payments, food bills, and retail therapy sessions that all led to one inevitable conclusion. I was about to learn the most expensive lesson of my life, and Clara was about to teach me that sometimes the person you do anything for wouldn't do a damn thing for you. So there I was, still living in my own personal fantasy where Clara would eventually transform into a contributing member of society, and more importantly, a contributing member of our relationship. Boy, was I in for the shock of my fucking life. The graduation ceremony had barely ended. Her diploma was probably still warm from the printer, and suddenly Miss Future Attorney-at-Law decided it was time for the most ridiculous breakup conversation in the history of romantic disasters. It was a Tuesday morning, because apparently Clara believed in ruining perfectly good weekdays. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, you know, the one in my house that I paid for, trying to enjoy my coffee and scroll through my phone like a normal human being. Clara walks in looking like she'd been practicing this moment in the mirror, which, knowing her dramatic ass, she probably had. She's carrying this oat milk latte that cost more than my lunch, sipping it like she's about to deliver a TED Talk on relationships. She sits down across from me with this serious expression, the kind you'd expect someone to wear while delivering news about a terminal illness or announcing they'd accidentally burned down the neighbor's garage. Instead, what came out of her mouth was so goddamn ridiculous, I thought I was being punked. "I think we should break up," she says, pausing for dramatic effect like she's auditioning for a soap opera. "You don't contribute enough emotionally." I swear to God, I nearly spit my coffee across the table. Actually, scratch that, I did spit my coffee across the table. Thank Christ it wasn't the good stuff, just some generic brand I'd grabbed because, surprise, surprise, I'd been watching my spending after financing someone else's education for the past 6 years. Emotionally insufficient. That's what I was, apparently. Me, the guy who'd listened to her complain about Professor Dixon's unfair grading standards for 3 solid semesters. Me, who'd held her hair back when she got food poisoning from that sketchy sushi place she insisted on trying. Me, who'd sat through more episodes of The Bachelor than any straight man should legally be required to endure, just because she needed someone to discuss the complex relationship dynamics with. But sure, Clara, I'm emotionally unavailable. What exactly do you mean by that? I asked, because clearly I'm a glutton for punishment and wanted to hear just how deep this rabbit hole of delusion went. Oh, she had a whole fucking presentation ready. Apparently, remembering to take out the trash every Tuesday didn't count as real partnership. Neither did the fact that I'd been single-handedly keeping our household running while she focused on her studies. No, what Clara wanted was someone who would anticipate her every emotional need, read her mind when she was stressed, and probably write her a sonnet every morning about how beautiful she looked in her ratty study sweatshirt. "You never asked me about my feelings," she continued, because this train wreck was apparently just getting started. "You never initiate deep conversations about our future." Our future? Lady, I'd been bankrolling our future for 6 years while you figured out the difference between a tort and a tort. I wanted to ask her if she considered real partnership to include contributing financially, or maybe just contributing anything beyond her charming personality and expensive taste in coffee. She kept going, building up steam like she was presenting her closing arguments to a jury. I need someone who's emotionally available, someone who can support me as I start my career. Support her as she starts her career. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a butter knife and served it for breakfast. This is the same woman who'd spent the last 6 years being supported, financially, emotionally, and practically, while she pursued her dreams. But now that the roles might finally reverse, now that she might actually have to contribute something to the relationship besides her presence, suddenly, I'm not emotionally evolved enough for her sophisticated needs. The best part? She had this whole plan mapped out. Not a plan for how we could work on our relationship, or how we could communicate better, or how she could maybe start acting like an actual partner. No, her plan was much simpler. I should move out. Move out. Of my own house. The house I'd owned before she'd ever set foot in it. The house where my name was on the deed, the mortgage, the insurance, and every single utility bill. But in Clara's mind, I should pack up my shit and find somewhere else to live so she could reset her life. I think it would be best if you moved out, she said, sipping that overpriced latte like she was discussing the weather. I need space to figure out who I am now that I'm not a student anymore. Space. In my house. To figure out who she is. Well, I could have saved her some time and money on that journey of self-discovery. She was a mooch. A beautiful, charming, well-educated mooch, but a mooch nonetheless. I sat there for a moment, processing this absolute clusterfuck of a conversation. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to grab a calculator and show her exactly how much emotional contribution I'd made over the years, itemized by category and adjusted for inflation. Instead, I just nodded and said, okay. Not because I agreed with her. Not because I thought she was right. Not because I was planning to pack up my life and move out of my own damn house. I said okay because I was curious. I wanted to see just how far she'd take this delusion. I wanted to watch her try to navigate the real world without someone else footing the bill for her lifestyle. She seemed surprised by my calm reaction. I think she was expecting drama, tears, begging. Maybe she thought I'd fall to my knees and promise to be more emotionally available if she'd just give me another chance. Instead, I finished my coffee, the cheap coffee that I'd bought with my own money, and started planning my next move. Because here's the thing Clara forgot in all her excitement about starting fresh. She might have graduated law school, but she'd apparently skipped the class on reading comprehension. Specifically, comprehending whose name was on the property deed. I'm glad we can handle this maturely, she said, probably already mentally redecorating my guest room into whatever Instagram-worthy space she had planned. Maturely, right. Because there's nothing more mature than asking your financial provider to move out of his own house after 6 years of freeloading. But sure, let's call it mature. I spent the rest of that day watching Clara float around the house like she'd just won the lottery, making plans for her new independent life in what she apparently considered her home now. Every smile, every excited phone call to her friends, every Pinterest board she started creating for her fresh start, just added fuel to the fire building in my chest. She wanted space to figure out who she was. Perfect. I was about to help her figure that out real quick. And something told me she wasn't going to like the answer. You know what's absolutely mind-blowing? The speed at which someone can completely rewrite reality in their own head. I'm talking Olympic-level mental gymnastics here, the kind that would make a circus contortionist weep with envy. Because after that spectacular breakup conversation where Clara basically fired me from my own life, did she pack her bags and head out to find her own place? Did she start apartment hunting or crash with friends while she figured out her next move? Hell no. This woman doubled down on the delusion so hard, I started wondering if she'd suffered some kind of head injury during graduation that I'd somehow missed. The very next morning, I wake up to the sound of Clara rearranging furniture. Not her furniture. Because let's be real, the woman owned maybe 3 things that weren't bought with my credit card. No, she was rearranging my furniture in my house, like she was the new interior designer I'd somehow hired overnight. I stumbled downstairs in my boxers and t-shirt, expecting to find her packing boxes or at least pretending to look for apartments on her laptop. Instead, I find her standing in the middle of my guest room with a measuring tape, talking to herself like she's hosting her own private episode of Property Brothers. This room gets great natural light, she's saying to absolutely nobody. Perfect for a home office setup. I'm standing in the doorway watching this performance, and I swear I thought I was still dreaming. But no, this was real life, and Clara had apparently promoted herself to homeowner overnight. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my voice casual even though my brain was screaming what the fuck on repeat. She turns around with this bright smile, like we hadn't just had the world's most ridiculous breakup conversation less than 24 hours ago. "Oh good, you're up. I was thinking about converting this space into my new office. You know, somewhere I can really focus on building my career." My new office. In my house. That she'd just told me to move out of. I nodded slowly, like I was processing this information instead of planning her eviction. "Your new office. That's great." And that was just the beginning of Clara's transformation from girlfriend to squatter-in-chief. Over the next few days, I watched this woman operate like she'd just inherited a mansion from a rich uncle she'd never mentioned. She was making plans, people, big plans, expensive plans, plans that somehow all involved my house and my money, despite the fact that she'd literally dumped me. "I'm thinking about hosting legal study groups here," she announced over breakfast that I'd paid for, naturally. "You know, invite some of my classmates over to discuss cases and network." Legal study groups. The woman who'd spent 3 years treating her textbooks like decorative paperweights suddenly wanted to become the academic queen bee. And she wanted to do it in my living room, using my Wi-Fi, and probably serving snacks that would mysteriously appear on my grocery bill. But wait, there's more. Because Clara wasn't just planning to turn my house into her personal law library. Oh no, she had bigger dreams than that. "I've been thinking about getting a dog," she mentioned casually while scrolling through what I could only assume were puppy adoption websites. "Now that I don't have to worry about anyone nagging me about responsibility." A dog. She wanted to get a dog. In my house. After telling me I wasn't emotionally available enough for her sophisticated needs. Apparently, a golden retriever would provide better companionship than the guy who'd been financing her entire existence for 6 years. The nagging comment was particularly rich. Because according to Clara's revisionist history, I was apparently some kind of controlling monster who'd been holding her back from pet ownership. Never mind the fact that she couldn't remember to water the one houseplant we had. Sorry, the one houseplant I had, without me reminding her. Never mind that she considered it a major accomplishment when she managed to keep her phone charged for more than 6 hours. But sure, let's add a living creature to the mix. "What kind of dog?" I asked, because I'm clearly a masochist who enjoys watching train wrecks in slow motion. "Maybe a husky," she said dreamily. "Or a German shepherd. Something big and impressive." Big and impressive. Like the mortgage payments she'd never made. Like the grocery bills she'd never questioned. Like the complete lack of self-awareness she was displaying in this very conversation. I started inviting my buddies over just to witness this spectacle, because honestly, nobody would believe me if I tried to describe it secondhand. Marcus came by on Thursday and found Clara measuring the windows for new curtains. New curtains that she was planning to buy for the house she'd asked me to move out of. "She's planning to redecorate?" Marcus whispered to me in the kitchen while Clara explained her vision for updating the whole vibe of the space. Apparently, I whispered back. "Yesterday she asked me if I thought hardwood or tile would look better in the bathroom." Marcus just stared at me. "Bro, you know she broke up with you, right? Like, that actually happened." Trust me, I was starting to wonder myself. Because Clara was acting like she'd just won the housing lottery instead of ending a 6-year relationship. She was walking around with this energy that screamed, new homeowner, not recently single and technically homeless. The absolute peak of her delusion came on Saturday when she started talking about hosting dinner parties. "I want to invite some people from my graduating class," she explained while making herself a smoothie with ingredients from my fridge. "You know, really establish myself as someone who has their life together." Their life together. The irony was so thick I could have bottled it and sold it as a comedy special. Here's a woman who'd just graduated law school but had never held a real job, never paid a bill, never even successfully kept a houseplant alive, and she wanted to present herself as the picture of adult success. In a house she didn't own, serving food she didn't buy, to impress people with stability she'd never actually achieved. "That sounds ambitious," I said, because what else do you say to someone who's living in an alternate reality? "I know, right?" she beamed. "I'm finally ready to take control of my life." Take control of her life. By continuing to live rent-free in someone else's house after dumping them. by making plans that assumed unlimited access to resources she'd never contributed to, by acting like a breakup was actually a promotion to head of household. My friends thought I was exaggerating when I told them about Clara's transformation into the queen of delusion. They figured I was just being bitter about the breakup, letting my hurt feelings color the story. So I started taking videos. Not creepy secret recordings, just casual documentation of Clara explaining her plans for her house, her office, her dinner parties, her future dog. The reactions were priceless. Pure, unfiltered shock. Because even my most cynical friends couldn't believe someone could be that completely detached from reality. But I wasn't shocked anymore. I was fascinated. I wanted to see just how far this rabbit hole went, how deep Clara could dig herself into this fantasy before reality came knocking. And trust me, reality was about to come knocking real hard. Just when I thought Clara's delusion tour had reached its peak, just when I figured she couldn't possibly top her performance as the queen of my house, she decided to add a new player to this absolute shit show. Because apparently, breaking up with me and then refusing to leave my property wasn't quite enough drama for 1 week. No, Clara needed to really drive the point home about how completely she'd lost touch with reality. It was a Friday evening, and I'm sitting in my living room, emphasis on my, trying to decompress from a long week of pretending everything was normal while my ex-girlfriend planned her new life in my house. I'm watching some mindless Netflix show, enjoying a beer that I'd bought with my own money from my own fridge, when Clara comes prancing down the stairs like she's got some big announcement to make. "Oh, by the way," she says, casual as can be, "I have a friend coming over tonight." A friend. Right. Because Clara's definition of friend had always been pretty fucking loose. In college, her study group friends usually turned out to be guys who wanted to get in her pants and barely knew the difference between a textbook and a coloring book. Her workout friends were dudes from the gym who spent more time flexing than exercising. So when she said friend with that particular tone, that sing-song voice that meant she thought she was being clever, I knew exactly what kind of friend we were talking about. "Cool," I said, not looking away from the TV. "Should I make myself scarce?" She laughed like I'd just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "Don't be silly. It's your house too." "My house too." Jesus Christ. The woman had more nerve than a telemarketer calling during dinner. It was my house, period. Not my house too. Not our house. Not her house, mine. But sure, Clara, let's pretend we're roommates now instead of ex-boyfriend and squatter. About an hour later, the doorbell rings. I'm not moving from my spot on the couch, which, for the record, I'd paid for, because this is my house and I shouldn't have to hide in my own damn bedroom just because Clara decided to invite someone over. If she wanted privacy for whatever this was, she could get her own place. Clara practically skips to the front door, and when she opens it, I get my first look at Brandon. Because of course his name was Brandon. Of course it was some generic pretty boy name that probably came with its own polo shirt collection and trust fund. This dude was tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", with that perfectly messy hair that takes 2 hours and $50 worth of product to achieve. He was wearing khakis, fucking khakis, and a button-down shirt that looked like it had never seen a washing machine, probably because Brandon had people for that sort of thing. And he was holding a bottle of wine, some fancy-looking shit with a label I couldn't pronounce, like he was auditioning for a role in a romantic comedy. "Brandon," Clara squealed, and I swear to God, she actually squealed, like a teenage girl meeting her favorite boy band member. Come in, come in." Brandon stepped into my entryway with this confident smile, the kind of smile that said he'd never been rejected for a loan or had to check his bank balance before buying coffee. He handed Clara the wine bottle, like he was presenting her with the crown jewels. "Thanks for having me over," he said, and his voice was exactly what you'd expect from someone named Brandon who wore khakis voluntarily. Smooth, confident, probably practiced in the mirror. "Of course," Clara gushed. "Let me give you the tour." The tour. She was giving him the tour. Of my house. Like she was a real estate agent showing off a $1 million listing instead of a recent ex-girlfriend who'd been living rent-free for years. I stayed on my couch, pretending to watch TV while actually listening to Clara's performance. And what a performance it was. "This is my living room," she announced, and I could hear them walking around behind me. My living room. The living room with my furniture, my TV, my gaming console, my coffee table that still had ring stains from all the drinks she'd spilled over the years. Wow, Brandon said, and he sounded genuinely impressed. This is really nice. Great space. Great space that he was admiring while I sat right fucking there, invisible apparently, like I was part of the furniture. Which, given how Clara had been treating me lately, maybe I was. They moved into the kitchen next, and I could hear Clara explaining the layout like she'd designed it herself. I love cooking in here, she was saying. So much counter space, and the lighting is perfect. She loved cooking in here. The woman who considered microwaving leftover pizza a culinary achievement was suddenly Martha Stewart, showing off her kitchen prowess to pretty boy Brandon. The same kitchen where I'd made 90% of our meals over the past 6 years while she sat at the table scrolling through Instagram. And this is my office, Clara continued, and I knew they'd reached the guest room. The guest room that had been a storage space for Amazon boxes until approximately 3 days ago, when Clara decided it was her professional headquarters. This is where I'll be doing all my legal work, she explained. I'm hoping to build up a client base pretty quickly. A client base. The woman didn't even have a job yet, let alone clients. She was talking to Brandon like she was already some hotshot attorney with a thriving practice, instead of someone who'd just graduated and was squatting in her ex-boyfriend's house. But Brandon was eating it up. That's incredible, he kept saying. You're so ambitious. And this place is amazing. And you've really got everything figured out. Everything figured out. Sure, if you considered mooching off someone else while pretending to be an independent woman, having everything figured out. They came back into the living room, and Clara plopped down on the other end of the couch like this was the most natural thing in the world. Brandon took the chair across from us. My chair, the one I'd specifically bought because it was the perfect angle for watching football, and looked around like he was taking inventory. So this is all yours? He asked Clara, gesturing around the room. All hers. I waited to see how she'd answer that one, curious about what level of bullshit she was willing to commit to in front of her new friend. Well, Clara said, glancing at me for the first time since Brandon had arrived, it's complicated. But yes, essentially. Essentially. That was one way to put it. Another way might be, absolutely not. This is my ex-boyfriend's house, and I'm basically trespassing at this point. But I guess that wouldn't have impressed Brandon quite as much. I just sat there, sipping my beer, watching this whole charade unfold. Brandon was nodding along to everything Clara said, asking questions about her career plans and her living situation, and she was spinning this elaborate fantasy about her new independent life. The best part? She kept referring to everything as mine. My kitchen, my office, my living room. Like she'd somehow inherited the place through osmosis or won it in a contest she forgot to mention. Brandon was completely buying it. Every word, every gesture, every casual mention of my house and my space. This dude was sitting in my chair, drinking wine in my living room, admiring my walls, and nodding along while my ex-girlfriend performed the most elaborate con job I'd ever witnessed. And the whole time, I'm thinking, sir, you're drinking $12 wine on my couch, admiring my property, while being lied to by a woman who just asked me to move out of my own house 3 days ago. Maybe sit down and really think about what's happening here before you get too comfortable. That night, lying in my own bed in my own house, listening to Clara and Brandon giggling downstairs like a couple of teenagers whose parents had gone out of town, I made a decision. Not an emotional decision, not a revenge decision. Though let's be honest, there was definitely some satisfying revenge involved, but a practical, logical, adult decision about my living situation. Clara wanted to play house. Fine. She could play house somewhere else. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was basically being held hostage in my own home by someone who dumped me for not being emotionally available enough. While I was lying there planning my next move, she was downstairs with Captain Khakis, probably showing him photo albums and talking about her vision for redecorating the place. I grabbed my phone and started researching locksmiths. Not because I'm vindictive. Okay, maybe I'm a little vindictive, but because this situation had officially crossed the line from ridiculous to unacceptable. Clara had made it crystal clear that she didn't want to be with me anymore, but apparently she still wanted to be with my house, my utilities, my Wi-Fi, and my fully stocked refrigerator. Time for a reality check, courtesy of the fine art of property ownership. Saturday morning came, and I woke up early on purpose. Clara was still passed out in the guest room. Sorry, her office. Probably dreaming about her future legal empire or whatever fantasy she was living in these days. I could hear Brandon's car pulling out of the driveway, which meant Pretty Boy had finally gone home to his own place, wherever the hell that was. I made my coffee extra quiet, then sat at my kitchen table and called the first locksmith on my list. Professional Locksmith Services, open 24/7, specializing in residential emergencies. Perfect. Hi, I said when someone answered. I need to change all the locks on my house today. Emergency lockout situation? The guy asked. Something like that, I replied. More like an emergency lock-in situation that needs to become a lockout situation. He didn't ask for details, bless him, just quoted me a price and said he could be there by noon. I love this man already. While I waited for my locksmith savior to arrive, I spent the morning acting completely normal. Made breakfast, watched SportsCenter, even did some laundry. Clara eventually stumbled downstairs around 11, looking like she'd been hit by a truck full of cheap wine and poor life choices. Morning, she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot like a zombie seeking brains. Morning, I replied cheerfully. Sleep well. She gave me a suspicious look, probably wondering why I wasn't sulking or asking uncomfortable questions about her overnight guest. Truth was, I was in too good a mood to sulk. I had a plan, I had a locksmith coming, and I had the deed to my house safely tucked away in my filing cabinet upstairs. Brandon's really nice, she said, testing the waters. Seems like it, I agreed. He definitely seemed to like the place. Yeah, he was really impressed with everything. She was fishing for a reaction, waiting for me to get jealous or angry or dramatic. Instead, I just nodded. I bet he was. It's a nice house. That confused her. She was expecting me to throw a fit, demand explanations, maybe even try to win her back with promises of being more emotionally available. Sorry, Clara. That ship had sailed, and it was heading straight for Reality Harbor. At exactly 12:05, Professional Locksmith Services pulled into my driveway. The guy who got out looked like he could change locks in his sleep, and probably had. Work boots, tool belt, no-nonsense attitude. My kind of professional. Clara was upstairs, probably video chatting with one of her friends about her amazing new life and super sweet guy she'd met. Perfect timing. I met the locksmith at the front door and explained the situation. Well, the relevant parts anyway. I need all the exterior locks changed, I told him. Front door, back door, side entrance. How many keys you want? He asked, already getting his tools ready. Just 2 sets, I said. Both for me. He nodded like this was the most normal request in the world. Probably wasn't even the weirdest job he'd had that week. Guy probably had stories that would make my Clara situation look like a Disney movie. The whole process took about 2 hours. 2 hours of drilling, measuring, and installing while Clara remained blissfully unaware upstairs. I could hear her moving around, probably planning her next dinner party or researching expensive dog breeds she wanted to adopt. When the locksmith finished, he handed me 4 shiny new keys and a bill that was worth every penny. All set, he said. Nobody's getting in without those keys. Music to my ears, I told him, and I meant it. After he left, I sat on my front porch testing the new keys, making sure everything worked perfectly. They did. Beautiful, functional, Clara-proof locks that were about to teach someone a very expensive lesson about property ownership. Around 3 o'clock, Clara came wandering downstairs again, this time dressed like she was heading out somewhere important. Probably meeting Brandon for coffee, or maybe shopping for furniture for her office. I'm going out for a bit, she announced, grabbing her purse and the old house key from the hook by the door. Sounds good, I said, not looking up from my phone. Take your time. She paused at the door, probably expecting me to ask where she was going or when she'd be back. When I didn't, she just shrugged and headed out. I waited exactly 30 seconds after her car disappeared down the street, then locked the front door with my shiny new key. Then I did the same with the back door and the side entrance. Every exit, secured. Every entry point, officially under new management. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and waited. Clara came back around 6:30, probably expecting to waltz right in and continue her little homeowner fantasy. I heard her car door slam, heard her footsteps on the front porch, heard her key slide into the lock. Then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Nothing. No click, no turn, no door opening. Just silence, followed by confused rattling as she tried the key again. And again, and again. I gave her about 5 minutes to figure out that her key wasn't working before I casually strolled to the front door and opened it. Clara was standing there looking like someone had just told her Santa Claus wasn't real and the Easter Bunny had filed for bankruptcy. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorframe like this was the most normal conversation in the world. "Having trouble with your key?" Her face went through about 15 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, realization, anger, panic, and then back to confusion. "What did you do?" she asked. "Change the locks," I replied. "My house, my locks, my decision." "You can't do that," she shrieked, and the sound was so high-pitched I was worried about nearby dogs. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone to show her a photo I'd taken of the deed earlier, "I can." And I did. Turns out, when your name is on the property deed, you get to decide who has keys. She stared at the photo like it was written in a foreign language, which, given her apparent understanding of property law, it might as well have been. "By the way," I added, because I was feeling generous, "you'll need to grab your stuff today. I'm thinking before dinner would be good." You'd think that getting locked out of someone else's house would be a pretty clear wake-up call about who actually owns what, right? You'd think that having to pack your shit into trash bags while the actual homeowner watches from his own doorway would be enough reality for one person to handle. But if you thought that, you clearly don't know Clara well enough, because this woman's relationship with the truth was more complicated than her relationship with actually paying for things. The packing process was exactly as pathetic as you'd imagine. Clara stumbling around my house, former house, from her perspective, throwing clothes into garbage bags like she was fleeing a natural disaster. Which, in a way, she was. The natural disaster of her own poor life choices finally catching up with her. I helped her load the bags into her car, because I'm not a complete asshole, just a fed-up one. The whole time she kept muttering about lawyers and tenants' rights, which was hilarious considering she'd never paid rent and we'd never had a lease. Good luck explaining that one to whatever legal aid attorney she thought she could afford. "This isn't over," she said as she slammed her trunk shut. "Yeah, it pretty much is," I replied. "But hey, good luck with the new, independent life you wanted so badly." She drove off in a cloud of dramatic fury and exhaust fumes, probably heading straight to Brandon's place to tell him how her evil ex-boyfriend had stolen her house. I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. For about 3 days, I enjoyed the sweet, sweet silence of living alone in my own house again. No one asking me to buy organic everything at Whole Foods. No one leaving dishes in the sink while claiming they were too busy studying to clean up. No one making plans for my property without consulting me. It was fucking paradise. But then my phone started buzzing. First it was a text from my buddy Marcus. "Dude, Clara's telling everyone you're a deadbeat who was living off her." Then another one from my coworker Janet. "Hey, just heard about your breakup. Sorry Clara had to support you through everything." Then my cousin Mike. "Bro, Clara said you were freeloading? That doesn't sound like you." Freeloading. Me. The guy who'd been bankrolling Princess Law School for 6 years was apparently the freeloader in this situation. The audacity was so spectacular, I actually had to sit down and laugh. This woman was rewriting history faster than a politician during election season. But the real kicker came when Marcus sent me a screenshot from our old college group chat. Clara had written this whole sob story about how she'd been financially supporting me throughout our relationship, how I'd been taking advantage of her success, and how she'd finally found the strength to kick me out and reclaim her independence. Her success. The woman who'd never held a job longer than a summer internship was talking about her success. The woman who thought budgeting meant choosing between the expensive coffee and the really expensive coffee was lecturing people about financial responsibility. I stared at that screenshot for a good 5 minutes, trying to process the sheer balls it took to flip reality that completely upside down. Then I started laughing. Then I started getting pissed. Then I realized I had something Clara apparently forgot about: documentation. See, here's the thing about being the person who actually pays for everything. You tend to keep records. Bank statements, mortgage papers, utility bills, grocery receipts. I had 6 years' worth of proof that Clara's version of events was complete bullshit, and I was about to share it with the world. I opened my laptop and got to work. Screenshots of mortgage payments, all in my name. Pictures of utility bills, all in my name. Bank statements showing the tuition payments, all from my account. Credit card bills for all those Whole Foods trips and study snacks, and ergonomic furniture. Even photos of the actual house deed, because apparently some people needed visual aids to understand basic property ownership. But my personal favorite was the photo I'd taken of Clara's graduation announcement, where she thanked everyone who supported me through this journey. Not everyone who financially carried me through 6 years of law school while I contributed nothing, just supported me. Like I'd been her cheerleader instead of her personal ATM. I compiled everything into one beautiful, devastating collection of evidence and posted it to our group chat with a simple message. Since there seems to be some confusion about who was supporting whom, here are the receipts. Literally, the response was immediate and glorious. Marcus, damn. Clara really said you were the freeloader. Janet, wait, you paid for all of this? For 6 years. Mike, bro, she tried to tell me you couldn't even afford rent. Sarah from our old study group, I'm dead. She told me you were borrowing money from her parents. The screenshots kept coming. Apparently, Clara had been spreading this revised version of our relationship to anyone who would listen. According to her story, I was some kind of deadbeat boyfriend who'd been coasting through life on her dime while she worked tirelessly to build our future. The irony was so thick you could have served it at one of those dinner parties she'd been planning in my house. But the best part was watching people connect the dots in real time. These weren't strangers. They were people who'd known us for years, who'd seen Clara's lifestyle, who'd watched me pay for dinner after dinner after dinner while she forgot her wallet at home. Tom from my old job. Wait, didn't Clara always complain about being broke? Lisa from Clara's study group. She never bought her own drinks when we went out. Ever. Kevin, who'd helped me move furniture when Clara first moved in. Didn't you already own that house before you guys got together? The group chat was turning into a real-time fact-checking session, and Clara's story was falling apart faster than her law school study schedule. People were remembering things, putting pieces together, realizing they'd been fed a completely fabricated version of events. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. People were sharing their own Clara stories, times she'd borrowed money and forgotten to pay it back, times she'd shown up to group dinners without her wallet, times she'd talked about expensive purchases while claiming to be financially struggling. The woman had apparently been running the same con on everyone, just on a smaller scale. I was just the biggest mark, the one who'd fallen for it completely and funded her entire lifestyle for 6 years. But here's what really got me. She was still trying to maintain the story even after being confronted with evidence. People were commenting with questions, asking for her side of things, and she was doubling down on the lies. Those receipts don't tell the whole story, she posted. There are other ways to contribute to a relationship besides money. Other ways to contribute. Like what, Clara? Like using my Netflix password? Like occasionally pretending to listen when I talked about my day? Like gracing me with your presence while I worked my ass off to pay for your dreams? The group chat had turned into a roast session, and Clara was the guest of honor. People were posting laughing emojis, asking pointed questions, sharing their own experiences with her selective memory about financial arrangements. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered her sitting in my kitchen, sipping coffee I'd bought, telling me I didn't contribute enough emotionally while planning to kick me out of my own house. My phone buzzed one more time. Clara had left the group chat. Chapter 7, Decluttering My Ex. After the group chat nuclear bomb went off and Clara's reputation exploded like a defective firework, I figured the worst was behind me. She'd been exposed, embarrassed, and exiled from our social circle. Justice served, case closed, time to move on with my life. But then I realized I still had one major problem. My house was full of Clara. Not Clara herself, thank God, but Clara's stuff. 6 years worth of crap that she'd accumulated with my money and then somehow forgot to take when she got the boot. And I'm not talking about a few personal items or sentimental keepsakes. I'm talking about an entire lifestyle's worth of belongings that needed to disappear before I could fully reclaim my space. The woman had spread through my house like some kind of expensive fungus. Every room had traces of her presence, reminders of the 6-year financial hostage situation I'd finally escaped. It was time for the most therapeutic spring cleaning session of my life. I started with the guest room, the space she'd claimed as her office during her brief reign as Queen of Delusion. The centerpiece was that ridiculous study desk I'd bought her. $600 for an ergonomic monstrosity that she'd used exactly twice. Once for the Instagram photo where she posed with her law books like some kind of scholarly influencer, and once to hold her laptop while she online shopped for clothes she couldn't afford. The desk had to go, not because I couldn't use it, but because every time I looked at it, I could see Clara sitting there pretending to study while actually watching TikToks with her textbooks open as props. That thing was cursed with the memory of wasted potential and my wasted money. I called the local homeless shelter and asked if they needed office furniture. "We'll take anything," the volunteers said, "especially study desks. We have people trying to get their GEDs." Perfect. At least someone would actually use the damn thing for its intended purpose. Next up was the living room, where Clara had left her mark on my furniture like a territorial cat. There was the throw pillow collection she'd insisted we needed. $40 pillows that served no purpose except to make sitting on my own couch unnecessarily complicated. There were the scented candles that cost more than my monthly phone bill, all with names like Tranquil Sunset and Meditation Garden that she'd light during her study sessions while binge-watching reality TV. But the crown jewel of living room evidence was the couch. My poor, abused couch that had suffered through 6 years of Clara's complete disregard for other people's property. The woman had treated it like her personal napkin, spilling everything from red wine to nacho cheese to whatever mysterious substance had created that permanent stain near the left armrest. The red wine incident was particularly memorable. Clara had been watching Bridgerton, for the 4th time, with a full glass of Cabernet, gesticulating wildly about the complex romantic dynamics when she knocked the entire glass over. Instead of immediately cleaning it up, she'd paused the show to take a selfie with the stain, captioning it, "Wine Mom Life LOL," on her Instagram story. The stain had been there ever since, a constant reminder of her priorities. That couch had to go too. I couldn't afford to replace it immediately, but I couldn't stand looking at it anymore either. Every time I sat down, I was literally sitting in the evidence of Clara's disrespect for my stuff. I posted it on Facebook Marketplace for $50, honestly describing its condition. Couch. Decent shape except for various stains from previous owner who believed furniture was disposable. Perfect for college students or anyone who enjoys archaeological mysteries in fabric form. A college kid bought it within 2 hours, probably figuring any stains he added couldn't possibly make it worse. He was probably right. Then came Clara's clothes, the ones she'd left behind in her dramatic exit. Not the stuff she grabbed in those trash bags, but the overflow items she'd forgotten about. The closet in the guest room was still half full of her shit, like she'd been planning to come back for round 2 of the homeowner fantasy. I found dresses I'd bought her for fancy dinners, shoes she'd insisted she needed for networking events, workout clothes that had never seen a gym. Each item came with its own memory of financial manipulation. The $100 yoga pants she'd needed for stress relief during finals. The designer heels for job interviews that never seemed to materialize. The little black dress for legal society mixers that always seemed to involve more mixing than legal discussion. Into the donation bags they went. All of it. Some local charity was about to receive the wardrobe of a woman who'd spent 6 years dressing like a successful professional while contributing absolutely nothing to the household budget that made it possible. But the real treasure hunt was in the kitchen. Clara had left behind her precious coffee machine, a $400 espresso maker that she'd convinced me she absolutely needed for her morning productivity ritual. This thing had more buttons than a NASA control panel and required special imported beans that cost more per pound than my car payment. The irony was that Clara's idea of productivity involved making one elaborate coffee drink and then spending 3 hours scrolling through social media. The machine had probably made about 50 cups of coffee in 2 years, which worked out to roughly $8 per cup when you factored in the initial cost. I looked up the model online and found out it was still worth about $250 in good condition. Since Clara had barely used it, shocking, I know, it was practically new. I listed it on eBay with brutal honesty. Expensive espresso machine, used approximately 12 times by someone who preferred the idea of being a coffee connoisseur to actually being one. The bathroom yielded another treasure trove of Clara's abandoned lifestyle accessories. Skincare products that cost more than my monthly gym membership, hair tools that required their own electrical outlet, makeup collections that could stock a department store counter. She'd left behind enough beauty products to supply a small salon, all of it purchased with my credit card during various self-care emergencies. I bagged it all up for the women's shelter downtown. They could redistribute it to women who were actually trying to rebuild their lives instead of living off someone else's generosity while pretending to be independent. With every bag I filled, every piece of furniture I hauled out, every trace of Clara's presence I erased from my house, I felt lighter. It wasn't just about the physical space, though God knows it felt good to reclaim my rooms. It was about the psychological cleansing. Each item represented a memory of being taken advantage of, and getting rid of it felt like deleting those memories from my life. By the end of the weekend, my house looked like my house again. Clean, uncluttered, and blissfully free of expensive shit I'd been guilt-tripped into buying. I'd donated enough stuff to qualify for a decent tax deduction, which seemed fitting since Clara's entire existence had been a drain on my finances. I celebrated by ordering pizza and eating it on my coffee table without worrying about someone lecturing me about proper dining etiquette or insisting we needed placemats that cost more than the actual food. Meanwhile, my phone was buzzing with updates from friends who'd spotted Clara around town. Apparently, she'd been couch surfing, moving from friend to friend as people got tired of her sob story about being unfairly evicted. Most people were politely declining to house her long-term, probably because they'd seen what happened to the last guy who'd offered her free room and board. Just when I thought the Clara saga had reached its natural conclusion, her stuff donated, her lies exposed, her delusions shattered like a wine glass at a Bridgerton marathon, my sister Naomi decided to drop a bombshell that made everything that had happened so far look like amateur hour. And let me tell you, when Naomi gets involved in family drama, she doesn't just participate, she orchestrates the whole damn symphony. I was having lunch at this little sandwich place downtown, finally enjoying the simple pleasure of eating a meal I'd paid for without someone across from me planning how to spend my money, when Naomi slid into the booth across from me with that look. You know the look, the one that says, "I have information that's going to blow your mind, but I'm going to make you sweat for it first." "So," she said, stealing one of my fries like she'd been doing since we were kids, "interesting story about your ex-girlfriend." I almost choked on my sandwich. "Please tell me Clara didn't try to hit you up for money." Naomi's grin could have powered a small city. "Oh, she absolutely did. Last week, actually. My jaw dropped so fast I'm surprised it didn't bounce off the table." "Are you fucking kidding me?" "Nope." "Called me Tuesday night, crying about how she'd invested everything in your relationship and you'd kicked her out unfairly." Naomi was clearly enjoying this way too much. Really pulled out all the stops. Talked about being homeless, struggling to restart her life, needing just a little help to get back on her feet. The audacity was breathtaking. Clara had the balls to call my own sister, my sister, and try to con her out of money using the same bullshit story she'd been peddling to everyone else. The woman who'd spent 6 years treating my bank account like her personal piggy bank was now trying to expand her operation to include my family. "Please tell me you hung up on her," I said, though something about Naomi's expression told me the story was just getting started. "Oh no," Naomi said, her grin getting wider. "I did something much better. I gave her the money." I stared at my sister like she'd just announced she was joining a circus or becoming a professional mime. "You what?" $2,000, she confirmed, looking absolutely delighted with herself. Wrote her a check right there on the spot. For a moment, I questioned everything I thought I knew about my own family. Had Naomi lost her mind? Had Clara's manipulation skills somehow worked on someone who'd known me my entire life? Had my own sister fallen for the same sob story that was currently making Clara the laughingstock of our entire social circle? "Naomi," I said slowly, "what the hell were you thinking?" That's when she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo that made everything click into place. It was a picture of a document, a handwritten, signed IOU that looked more official than half the contracts I'd seen in my professional life. "I was thinking," Naomi said, "that Clara was lying through her teeth, and I wanted it in writing." The IOU was a thing of beauty, written in Clara's own handwriting, signed and dated, with terms that would make a loan shark weep with joy. $2,000, borrowed from Naomi Peterson, to be repaid within 60 days at 15% interest. And the kicker? Clara had put her car up as collateral. "You got her to sign this?" I asked, studying the document like it was the Mona Lisa. "She was so desperate for the money, she would have signed over her firstborn," Naomi explained. "I told her I was happy to help, but as a small business owner, I couldn't just hand out cash without proper documentation. She practically ripped the pen out of my hand to sign it. My sister, ladies and gentlemen. While I'd been playing checkers, she'd been playing three-dimensional chess with a side of psychological warfare. But here's the really beautiful part. Naomi continued, clearly saving the best for last. I knew she was lying from minute one. Remember, I was there when you bought the house. I helped you move in before you even met Clara. I've seen your bank statements when you needed references for loans. I know exactly who's been supporting whom in this relationship. The trap was so elegant, so perfectly crafted, that I had to admire the artistry. Clara thought she was scamming $2,000 from my gullible sister. What she'd actually done was create a legal document that proved she was full of shit and desperate enough to lie to my family for money. So when I got her sob story about how she'd invested everything in your relationship, Naomi went on. I just nodded along and said, "Oh honey, that sounds terrible. Of course I'll help." Then I made her spell out exactly what she'd supposedly invested, how much she'd supposedly contributed, and how unfairly she'd supposedly been treated. All recorded? I asked, because Naomi was thorough like that. Voice memo on my phone, she confirmed. 23 minutes of Clara digging her own grave with a shovel made of lies. The woman had created a legal confession of fraud while thinking she was getting away with easy money. It was like watching someone try to rob a bank while accidentally filling out a detailed confession form. But wait, there's more, Naomi said, because apparently this masterpiece wasn't finished yet. She also had to provide 3 references who could vouch for her character and ability to repay the loan. I nearly fell out of the booth. She gave you references? Yep, Brandon, her mom, and some friend from law school. I called all 3 of them. This was getting better by the minute. And Brandon had no idea she was asking people for money. Thought she was financially stable because she owned that beautiful house. Her mom immediately asked if this was about the lies Clara had been telling about you stealing her property. And the law school friend? Turns out Clara still owes her $400 from their study group days. The house of cards was collapsing in real time, and Clara had built it herself. Every lie she'd told, every story she'd fabricated, every attempt to rewrite history was coming back to bite her in the ass with interest. So what happens now? I asked. Naomi's smile turned predatory. Well, the 60 days are almost up, and Clara hasn't made a single payment. According to the terms she signed, I can now legally claim her car. But I'm thinking I might be generous and give her a few more days to come up with the money. Out of the goodness of your heart, out of the entertainment value of watching her panic, Naomi corrected. She's been avoiding my calls for 2 weeks now. Apparently, when you actually have to pay money back instead of just receiving it, the whole borrowing thing becomes a lot less appealing. I looked at the IOU again, marveling at the beautiful simplicity of the trap. Clara thought she'd found another mark, another easy target in the family of the guy she'd been screwing over for years. Instead, she'd walked face first into a legal obligation that exposed her lies and put her in debt to someone who actually knew how to collect. You know what the best part is? Naomi asked, reading my mind. She thinks she scammed me. Even now, she probably thinks she pulled one over on your naive little sister who felt sorry for her situation. When really, she paid me $2,000 to create evidence of her own fraud and desperation. Naomi raised her soda like she was toasting. Cheers to stupid criminals who document their own crimes. We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of pride in my devious, brilliant sister who'd just taught Clara the most expensive lesson of her post-graduation life. The woman who'd spent 6 years thinking she was smarter than everyone else had just been outmaneuvered by someone who actually was. You'd think that getting legally trapped into a $2,000 debt with her car as collateral would be enough to teach Clara some humility. You'd think that having her lies exposed to 3 different people in one afternoon would maybe, possibly, encourage some self-reflection. You'd think that living in her Honda Civic in her parents' driveway might inspire a moment of, hey, maybe I should reconsider my life choices. But if you thought any of that, you clearly haven't been paying attention to the Clara show, because this woman's capacity for delusion was apparently infinite. Instead of taking her lumps and trying to rebuild her life with some actual honesty, she decided to double down on the crazy train and take her con game public. The text came from my buddy Jake at 7:30 on a Wednesday morning. Just a screenshot with the message, "Dude, you need to see this shit." It was a GoFundMe page. Help young woman reclaim her home from manipulative ex. And there, in all its delusional glory, was a picture of my house. My actual house, the one with my name on the deed, being presented as Clara's stolen property that she needed crowdfunding help to reclaim. I almost dropped my coffee. The audacity was so spectacular, so completely detached from reality, that I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The description was a masterpiece of creative writing that would have impressed fiction authors everywhere. According to Clara's version of events, she had invested her entire savings and sweat equity into building a home with her partner, only to be manipulated and stolen from when the relationship ended. She claimed she'd put years of financial investment and physical labor into the property, and now her abusive ex was trying to steal everything she'd worked for. Sweat equity. The woman who considered changing a light bulb a major home improvement project was claiming sweat equity in my house. The woman who'd never so much as mowed the lawn or unclogged a drain was presenting herself as some kind of DIY renovation expert who'd built the place with her bare hands. But the real kicker was the financial claims. Clara was telling people she'd funded the down payment, the renovations, the mortgage payments, basically everything except what she'd actually contributed, which was nothing. She'd created this elaborate fantasy where she was the homeowner and I was some kind of deadbeat boyfriend who'd somehow tricked her into paying for everything. The photos she'd posted were particularly infuriating. Pictures of my living room, my kitchen, my backyard, all captioned with things like, "the home I built," and "what I'm fighting to get back." She'd even posted a photo of the guest room, the one she'd claimed as her office for about 5 minutes, with the caption, "my workspace that I designed and furnished." With the desk I'd bought her. In the room that had been full of my storage boxes until she decided to play house. But the most insulting part was her goal, $50,000. She was asking strangers on the internet to give her 50 grand to fight for justice and reclaim her stolen home. That was more than I'd spent on the actual down payment for the house, and she was trying to crowdfund it based on completely fabricated sob stories. The comments section was a mix of outrage and sympathy that made my blood pressure spike. People were actually buying this shit. You go, girl, and don't let him steal what's yours. And men like this are why women can't get ahead. Mixed in with the occasional voice of reason asking for more details or proof, but mostly just blind support for Clara's victim narrative. By lunchtime, she'd raised $700. 700 actual dollars from people who believed her completely fictional account of our relationship. It was like watching a really disturbing social experiment about how easily people could be manipulated by a good sob story and some stolen photos. I called Jake back because I needed to vent to someone before I did something stupid like comment on the fundraiser with the actual facts. "This is insane," I told him. "She's literally asking people to pay her to sue me for my own house." "It gets worse," Jake said. "Check out her Facebook. She's been sharing this thing everywhere, telling people it's her last hope for justice." I made the mistake of looking. Clara had shared the GoFundMe link to every social media platform she had, each post more dramatic than the last. She was playing the victim so hard. I was surprised she hadn't started a podcast about it. After 6 years of building a life and a home together, one post read, "I've been left with nothing while he keeps everything we worked for. Please help me fight for what's rightfully mine." What's rightfully mine? The house I'd owned before I even met her was somehow rightfully hers because she'd lived in it rent-free for 6 years. The logic was so backward, it made my head hurt. But then something beautiful happened. Something that restored my faith in both justice and the internet's ability to fact-check bullshit. Clara's own mother reported the GoFundMe page. Margaret, bless her honest soul, had apparently seen her daughter's fundraising scam and decided enough was enough. According to the email notification I got, because someone had forwarded it to me, Margaret had contacted GoFundMe directly to report that the campaign contained false information and fraudulent claims. "My daughter does not own the property in question," Margaret had written in her report. "The home belongs entirely to her ex-boyfriend, who purchased it before their relationship began. She has never made any financial contributions to the property and is misrepresenting the facts to solicit donations." The page was suspended within hours. $50,000 goal, $700 raised, and then, poof, gone. along with a message from GoFundMe about campaigns that contain misleading information or fraudulent claims. Clara's response was exactly what you'd expect from someone whose latest scam had just been shut down by her own mother. According to the screenshots Jake sent me, she'd posted a furious rant about family betrayal and people who don't understand the complexity of the situation. The complexity of the situation. That's what she called lying to strangers on the internet for money. But the story gets even better, because apparently Clara's fundraising failure wasn't the end of her troubles. According to Marcus, who'd been keeping tabs on the Clara situation like it was his favorite reality show, she'd been kicked out of her parents' driveway after the GoFundMe incident. Margaret told her she was done enabling the lies. Marcus reported. Said Clara could come back when she was ready to tell the truth and apologize to everyone she'd tried to scam. So now Clara was living in her Honda Civic full-time, parking in different locations around town like some kind of nomadic con artist. Friends had been spotting her at various parking lots, still dressed like a successful lawyer even though she was essentially homeless and unemployed. Every morning, according to the reports, she'd drive to the local Starbucks, get ready in their bathroom, and then spend the day driving around claiming she had meetings with lawyers about her case. Every evening, she'd return to her mobile bedroom with nothing to show for it except another overpriced frappuccino and a growing sense of desperation. She's still telling people she has lawyers working on getting her house back, Marcus told me. Even showed someone what she claimed was a legal document, but it looked like she'd printed it herself. The woman was living in her car, funding her existence with the $700 she'd managed to scam before her own mother shut her down, and she was still maintaining the fantasy that she was going to somehow legally steal my house. It would have been sad if it wasn't so ridiculous. Clara had created this elaborate fictional universe where she was the victim, the homeowner, the successful attorney-to-be, and the righteous crusader fighting against injustice. And she was living in that universe so completely that reality couldn't penetrate it, even when reality meant sleeping in a Honda Civic. The final blow came when I least expected it, in the most mundane place possible, aisle 7 of the local grocery store, right between the cereal and the coffee. I was minding my own business, debating between brand names and generic options now that I actually had to budget for one person instead of subsidizing someone else's champagne taste on a beer budget, when a familiar voice called my name. "Hey there, stranger." I turned around to find Margaret, Clara's mom, pushing a cart filled with what looked like care packages. The kind of supplies you'd send to someone who was living rough: granola bars, instant ramen, bottled water, and cheap toiletries. "Margaret," I said, genuinely happy to see her. She'd always been straight with me, even when her daughter was spinning tales that would make Pinocchio jealous. "How have you been?" Her expression was a mix of embarrassment and resignation, like she was carrying the weight of her daughter's poor decisions. "I've been better, honestly. I wanted to talk to you, actually." We moved to a quieter corner of the store, away from other shoppers who didn't need to hear about the Clara disaster tour. "First off," Margaret said, "I owe you an apology. For the GoFundMe thing, for all the lies she's been spreading, for this whole mess." "You don't owe me anything," I told her. "You're not responsible for Clara's choices." "Maybe not, but I'm tired of enabling them." Margaret's voice had that exhausted quality that comes from dealing with someone who refuses to face reality. "She came to us begging for money, claiming you'd stolen her house. We were there when you bought that place, son. We helped you move your furniture before Clara ever set foot in it." The validation felt good, even though I didn't need it. Having someone from Clara's own family confirm what I already knew was like getting a receipt for reality. "She's been asking everyone for money," Margaret continued. "Friends, family, strangers on the internet. Always with the same story about how she was the victim, how she'd been supporting you, how you trapped her." "I heard about some of that," I said diplomatically. Margaret shook her head. "We finally had enough. Her father and we sat her down last week and told her we were cutting her off. No more money, no more parking in our driveway, no more enabling these fantasies." I could only imagine how that conversation had gone. Clara probably accused them of betraying her, of not understanding her situation, of taking my side against their own daughter. "We shipped her to her uncle in Phoenix," Margaret said. "He's got a retail job lined up for her, nothing fancy, but it's honest work. Real work, with a real paycheck that she'll have to earn." The image of Clara folding clothes at a department store or ringing up customers at a checkout counter was almost too perfect. From aspiring high-powered attorney to retail worker because she'd burned every bridge and exhausted every free ride. Good for you, I said, and I meant it. That took guts. It should have happened years ago, Margaret admitted. We enabled her just like you did, just like everyone else. But there comes a point where helping someone becomes hurting them. She was right. Clara had spent so long having other people solve her problems and fund her lifestyle that she'd never learned how to actually function as an independent adult. The real world was about to give her a crash course in responsibility. She's not talking to us right now, Margaret added. Says we're all against her, that we don't understand what she's been through. What she'd been through. 6 years of free rent, free food, free tuition, and free lifestyle maintenance, followed by the natural consequences of lying to everyone who tried to help her. She'll figure it out eventually, I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Margaret nodded, but she didn't look optimistic either. I hope so, for her sake. We talked for a few more minutes about mundane things, the weather, local news, anything that wasn't about Clara's spectacular implosion. When we parted ways, Margaret gave me a hug and told me I was a good man who'd been taken advantage of. I finished my shopping and drove home to my quiet, clean, Clara-free house. No one was there planning expensive redecorating projects with my money. No one was hosting imaginary dinner parties or shopping for dogs they couldn't afford. No one was spreading lies about my character while living off my generosity. Just me, my paid-off mortgage, and the sweet sound of absolutely nothing. Clara was in Phoenix now, probably crying to her uncle about how unfairly life had treated her, how she'd been supporting a deadbeat boyfriend who'd stolen everything she'd worked for. Maybe she'd eventually learn to take responsibility for her choices. Maybe she'd develop some actual job skills and figure out how to support herself. Or maybe she'd find some new Mark to con, some other generous soul who'd believe her sob stories and open their wallet for her dreams. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I was finally free, laughing all the way to my clean, quiet, paid-off house, where the only person spending my money was me.